The next thing I'd like to review is solving ratios. Now, this is really how to solve a very specific type of algebra question. If you happen to have watched our algebra video, then this should be no problem for you. Now, a ratio is basically another word for fraction. And the type of equation we're going to solve is one fraction equals another fraction, where one of the entries is an x and the rest are numbers. Now let me just give it a little example to make it clear what I'm talking about here. Let's say I ask you to solve for x in this question. Two over 5 equals x over 15, okay? So you see what I mean? I have one fraction equals another fraction, and all of these are numbers except for one of them, which is an x or some other letter. It's an unknown quantity. And our goal is to find out what is the number that x is to make this equation true. Well, in the algebra course we learned something called cross multiplying, right? And we can definitely solve these questions with cross multiplying, but I want to emphasize a certain technique of how to solve this which works really good for trigonometry. Now this one's kind of easy, isn't it? Because if we look here, we have a 5 here and a 15 there, right? Now, if you remember this really important rule of fractions, you're allowed to multiply top and bottom of the fraction by whatever you want, and it won't change the fraction, right? So if I multiply top and bottom of here by 3, like times 3 on both top and bottom, dot 3, dot means multiply, right? 5 times 3 is 15, and 2 times 3 is 6. So you may say, well, x is equal to 6. And you'd be perfectly right about that. That's true. I'm just going to erase this. But you know what, if we had some numbers, let's say this number wasn't a 15, what if it was a 17 or something? Then you can't find the whole number to multiply 5 by to get 15, and you might be stuck about how to solve for x. So I don't want to emphasize this method here, even though it works okay here. In other questions this is not going to work. So we need a method that's going to allow us to solve these questions all the time. And I'm going to show that to you right now. Just let me erase this. Now, when I look at this, I would like you guys to see two crosses, okay? Look at here. This is a cross between 2 and 15, and the other cross is here between 5 and x, okay? Now, in any one of these problems, we always have two crosses, this one and this one. And the technique to find x is this. You look at the cross with both numbers, in this case it's here, and you multiply those two numbers, okay? 2 times 15, and then you look at the cross with the letter in the number, okay? So you go to the cross with both numbers, you go 2 times 15 is 30, and then you divide by this number on the other cross. So 30 divided by 5 is 6. So x is equal to 6. Now I hope that wasn't too confusing. So x here is just 2 times 15 divided by 5. And let's try another example just to make it a little bit more clear. How about something like this? Let's solve for x in this one. 5 over 3 equals 8 over x. So let's identify the two crosses. This is a cross right here with 3 and 8, and this is a cross here with 5 and x. So what do? We find the cross which has two numbers. That's this one, right? Because this one just has a number and a letter. We look at the cross with both numbers, and we multiply those two numbers, and then we divide by the number that's been left out. So 3 times 8, 24, divided by the number that we haven't used yet, 5. So the answer here is going to be 24 divided by 5. And you can leave your answer in a fraction, that's fine. Or if you want to put it to decimal, we can do that too. I'll just use my calculator here. 24 divided by 5, it's 4.8. That's not very hard to figure out in your head, but in trigonometry you're allowed to use a calculator, so don't stress about doing some calculations with your calculator instead of doing everything in your head. Because a lot of trigonometry, we can't do it in our heads. We can't work it out on paper either. We have to use a calculator. And we'll get more on that later. So 4.8 is the answer to this question here. Let's do some more just to get better. And let's get a new sheet for that. Actually, before I go on, I just want to mention something else. Because in the algebra videos, we learned something called cross-multiplying, right? If you were given this equation here, 2 over 5 equals x over 15, the way I suggest in the algebra videos to solve this is to use cross-multiplying, right? We look on this cross, we multiply them, we get 30. 2 times 15 is 30. And then we look on this cross and we multiply them and we get 5x. And then we divide both sides by the number in front of x, right? And this side is x. 5 divided by 5 is 1, so we get 1x. And 30 divided by 5 is 6. And if you want to rewrite it with the x on the left-hand side, that's fine. So you see we get the same answer, don't we? X equals 6 on both of these. But this kind of involved a few more steps, right? What I like about this method in trigonometry is it kind of gives us the answer right away from the ratio equation to the answer. We can kind of do it in one step. Whereas here we have to kind of write down a couple intermediate steps. And then if you want to do it this way, that's really just fine. But I find this method of you multiply these two numbers and then divide by this one, I find that to be something that really works well with trig. Because a lot of times these aren't nice numbers in trig, right? They're the decimal values, and we're going to be using our calculator, so we can just type in what we need in our calculator right away to get our answer. So I just wanted to emphasize that there really is different ways of solving it. This is one way, and this is the other way, okay? And you really should know both of them. You should know how to do both. And what I'm saying is this is more appropriate for algebra, this little technique here, and this style here is really appropriate for trig, okay? And I think you'll understand why as we go on, and you'll see that you really don't want to bother with these steps for trig, although you should do them for algebra. Okay, so let's continue on. We're going to continue with learning this method, and the cross multiplying, we'll save that for questions in algebra. So let's get a new sheet and practice some more examples. Now let's look at these two examples. Both of them we have to solve for x. So how do we find x here? Well, we look for the cross which has both numbers on it. In this cross we have two numbers. In this cross we have a number and the variable. So what we want to do is focus our attention on this cross with these two numbers, okay? We multiply those two, and then we divide by this one. So the answer is going to be 1.5 multiplied by 3.2 divided by 8. You can just type that right in your calculator right away, or you can kind of show your work. And the way we're going to do that is 1.5, just like we said, 1.5 multiplied by 3.2. I'm using brackets for multiply. We don't want to write an x for multiply and then have an x out here for a variable. That would be just confusing. You could use a dot if you want. I prefer brackets. But just don't use an x for multiply anymore, okay? So this times this divided by that, divided by 8. And now you could, I guess, work that out by hand, but like I said before, this is trig where we have to use calculators, so don't feel bad about using a calculator to work this out. 1.5 times 3.2 divided by 8. Although if you had to, I really hope you can work that out by hand, right? And okay, so the answer is 0.6. Now that's all you have to do to get the solution for these kind of ratio problems, and that's all I want to get across in this video is this concept. All right, how about this one? We have two crosses. Here's a cross, and here's the other cross. On this cross, we have the variable and the number. On this cross, we have two numbers. Okay, that's the one I'm interested in. So I multiply the two numbers on this cross, and then I divide by the other number. So x here is going to be 56 multiplied by 725 divided by 200. Of course, you can say it the other way. If you want to say x is 725 times 56 divided by 200, that's perfectly fine as well. Doesn't matter the order of multiplication. So I go to my calculator. 56 times 725 divided by 200. And my answer is 203. And there we go. So I hope this is clear. Let me just review what I've talked about before I set you to do some problems on your own. Alright, there's basically four different types of examples that I just did. Let me write them out just to make sure that everything's clear. When I write this number sign, I just mean some number. Okay, it can be a decimal, a whole number, a fraction, whatever. If I ever have an algebra equation like this, how do I find x? Well, I look on the cross with both numbers, which would be this one, right? I multiply this times this, and then I divide by this other one, right? What if I had a situation like this? A number over x equals some number over some number. Well, here, this is the cross with both numbers, right? So I go this times this divided by that. No problem. What about if I have this situation? Number over number equals x over some other number. On this cross, I have two numbers. On this cross, I have a number and a letter. So I look at this one, don't I? I look at the cross with both numbers, and I multiply those two, and then I divide by the other one. And that gives me the answer for x, which makes this ratio true. And finally, the last scenario that we looked at was a number over a number equals a number over x. Our two crosses are here and here. This is the cross with both numbers, right? So let's look at that one first, and we multiply those two, get an answer, and then divide by this number, and that's going to be the value for x. So basically all I'm trying to say is you look at the cross with both numbers, you multiply them, and then you divide by the other one, and that's always going to give you the value for x no matter which situation you're in. Alright, I think you're ready to try those exercises now, and that's going to be the contents of the next video.